The White House is facing calls to take action after a federal judge in Texas on Friday ruled DACA is illegal. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program blocks the deportation of immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children, and it also allows them to work. The judge's ruling bars the Biden administration from approving any new applications, but it does not impact those who are already in the program. President Biden says the DOJ will fight the ruling, but Congress needs to take action to permanently protect the so-called dreamers. Activists echoed that call at a rally in Washington on Saturday.
Yesterday's ruling from Judge Hanen in Texas proves that our lives in this country are still at risk. Temporary protections will always leave our communities vulnerable to attacks like the one our communities faced yesterday.
Now is the time to act. We've been sounding the alarm for so many years. We got the people who are in Congress and in the White House in office. It was our people power that made that happen. Now is the time for them to stand up and stick to the promises that they've made to us. They need to keep immigration in the reconciliation package.
For a deeper dive, let's bring in CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press, Zeke Miller. Zeke, great to talk to you today. So how did the judge explain the underpinnings of his analysis in that ruling?
It's good to be with you, Lana. The judge there siding with the states, finding that who had argued that they were suffering harm from the DACA program, which is that and that thereby they had standing to sue the federal government to end a program that, in this judge's opinion, was illegal, that it was a presidential action led by President Obama that overstepped his legal authority, going into the realm of what Congress should have handled. Immigration policies generally, and it's something that is handled set by Congress, not by the president. That is something that President Biden, the White House now, are severely disputing, and it's worth noting that despite the efforts on the part of the last administration to change it, they went to the Trump administration went to court to try to was blocked from changing that in court. They didn't push that far here. This is a hot button issue, certainly, but one that now the judge is sort of injecting a little bit more urgency in Washington for lawmakers to address.
Yeah, and we know that the Biden administration intends to appeal that decision, but a legislative solution is what every administration has said needs to actually take place. And in March, the House approved legislation that would create a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, or so-called dreamers. What's the status of that legislation now?
Right now, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast. There's a move now afoot to sort of put this legislation into the so-called reconciliation bill, the legislation that Democrats are looking to move in tandem with that broader bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is the larger bill that they would look to pass with on a strictly party line vote in the House and the Senate. That is it is an interesting notion, sort of the sense there. This is a budget document, the reconciliation package, and they were going to try to essentially put policy in there. The logic being that the argument that Democrats are going to put forward is that when you provide legal status for people, you're getting their tax revenues and fees and things along those lines. So there's a actual real revenue benefit to the government, which means that you should be able to use it in person. Sort of use that legislative tool in order to pass this sort of legislation. We'll hear from Republicans certainly saying that is outside the scope of budget reconciliation, and ultimately it will come down to that all-powerful but sort of little-known person called the Senate parliamentarian, whether or not this legislation should be there. Democrats obviously could try to overrule the parliamentarian, but that would be sort of a step that they haven't gone to thus far. But really, it will come down to whether or not that will survive the parliamentarian's review, whether or not it can be in that legislation.
And Zeke, do we have any indication at this point, and obviously it's a bit early, but whether the parliamentarian would buy that argument that it has to do with expanding the tax base, and so in that sense it could be passed under a budget reconciliation tool rather than as its own separate piece of Senate legislation?
We don't yet. I mean, everyone's sort of trying to study the tea leaves there and then predict based on past rulings of the parliamentarian, but really it's up to that one individual, and then ultimately whether the majority in the Senate would try to overrule the parliamentarian with the ruling if there is a ruling that they did not like. It is certainly a live ball right now. We don't really know where it's going to end up, and that is going to be sort of just one element of the uncertainty with this legislative package. The other obviously being, can Democrats keep they're can they all keep all 50 senators in line and the majority of the House, and that's separate from the parliamentarian what the parliamentarian is going to do. They also need to keep all their folks in line as well.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the bipartisan audit of ballots from the 2020 presidential election that's been happening in Arizona. The AP, your organization, conducted its own review of Arizona ballots and has information about another false claim being pushed by a company involved in the audit. What more can you tell us about that?
This company that was hired by the by Republicans in the Arizona legislature to carry out this so-called independent audit, called Cyber Ninjas. They're claiming thousands upon thousands of mail-in ballots were reported being received by the government that were not reported being sent out. Our analysis and our reporting by my colleagues out in Arizona sort of point to the fact that the government of Maricopa County, the largest county in Arizona, sort of says that this firm's analysis was fundamentally flawed. It was using databases that were not intended to be used as a sort of perfect record of ballots that were sent out and ballots were going in. And they didn't, for instance, track ballots that were received on Election Day. They were using sort of an imperfect tool that was used to provide campaigns and candidates guidance about sort of what the early voting sort of balloting situation was looking like, but was not sort of the definitive source and record of that information. And that if and this company, which is carrying out essentially a partisan audit, which is really not really an audit at all at that point, to try to back up the former president's claims of baseless claims of election fraud. They're saying this is just so fundamentally baseless as a charge that there's nothing there, and that if you look at what was recorded, then if you look at the last administration's Justice Department, you look at independent analysis by the media, the legislature, the Republican governor in the state, all of those, there's no indication of fraud, of widespread fraud anywhere in the country, and certainly not on this level in Arizona.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, anywhere in the country, Arizona is perhaps more prominent at this moment, but efforts are also underway by Republican state lawmakers in Pennsylvania who are seeking a similar, quote, forensic review of the 2020 ballots. Former President Trump and his campaign lost dozens of court cases, several recounts, and the votes are certified. So what's the significance of an audit in Pennsylvania?
This should purely be a partisan exercise designed to sort of keep the president's baseless charge alive for his own personal political purposes. And really, this sort of speaks to Donald Trump's power still within the Republican Party electorate, that there are these Republican lawmakers, local officials, some federal officials, but partly local officials, who are willing to sort of carry his water and keep these audits and try to carry this out in different swing states, in part because they're looking for endorsements from the former president, or they're trying to sort of cater to his supporters who are still frustrated with the fact that that Donald Trump lost in 2020. So they're trying to tap into that discontent for political reasons. It's not, there is no mechanism to overturn an election result in the United States. Certainly not after the fact. Joe Biden is the president of the United States and he's in the White House. This is an effort by these lawmakers to sort of try to make political hay out of it for their own, career advancement, essentially.
All right, Zeke Miller, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.